Hey, kia ora koutou. Thanks everyone for coming out to the Future Slam party. This evening we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the arts with these two fine chaps and Kezia, who will be joining us via Zoom. Just quickly before we start, a few bits of housekeeping. We're going to hear from each of our speakers, and then at the end hopefully there'll be some time for some questions and some discussion. This will wrap up at 7 o'clock. In case you are time checking things, and also the museum's open till 8:30 if you want to have a bit of a wander around. If you need the bathroom, there's one out to head towards the dinosaurs and turn left by the bar. There's one that way, and we are filming this the event this evening, so you guys won't be in it, but just so that you know that's happening. Okay, let's dive in. I feel like artificial intelligence is as a topic is so broad and so sort of increasingly prevalent that one of the easiest ways to talk about it is to frame it against a creative practice. Art's a very human-centric medium, and so I figured it would be easiest for us to, everybody knows what art is, everybody has an opinion about it, so that's the easiest way for us to think about talking about AI. Our speakers this evening are Kezia Barnett, Tim Gibson and Gregory Bennett. Each of these speakers are bringing a pretty unique perspective on AI and art. So we'll start with Kezia, who is joining us on via the magic of Zoom. Kezia has been working in the creative industry for over 20 years. Is Kezia, are you there? Ah, there you are. Hi. Oh, hang on, I think, classic, muted. Anyway, Kezia has been working in the creative industry for over 20 years. She's a filmmaker, director, photographer and artist. She has won awards for her work, which has been shown internationally, and has a fine arts degree. Kezia, are you there? Almost.
A while ago, I'm so sorry. Hello.
Oh no, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So I was just telling everyone who you are.
Oh,
really,
fantastic.
but you didn't miss much because you probably already know all of that anyway. So Kezia now suffers from a chronic illness and has been using artificial AI to further her creative practice for about 8 months.
Yeah, so it's the middle of last.
Yeah, cool. So, Kezia, would you like to tell us a little bit about your work and what artificial intelligence means for you?
Sounds great. Thank you for organising tonight, and nice to be speaking alongside these two that I can't see. As you mentioned, I've sort of been in the creative arts for, it's probably, I don't know, forever, but I have been a director of international commercials for about 20 years, and I travelled around the world shooting in Europe, Asia, US, Australia, New Zealand, pretty much everywhere. And I studied at Elam Art School as well. That's just a bit about my history. What's interesting about AI for me is that it's really enabled me to create again. So I got a virus and a head knock both in the same year, in 2011, and that left me with 10 years of very puzzling symptoms, trying to unravel what was happening. But basically it's like a post-viral crossed with a post-concussion, and it leaves me about 95% bedbound, and I have different days up and down with pain and fatigue and sensitivities to sound and light and pretty much life. So I found myself really not being able to create in any of the ways that I could create. And last year, in the middle of the year, I was in a really major crash. So I basically I was lying down. I couldn't really sit up, and I could text with one eye open because that was all the energy I had. I just was so low in energy. And I discovered AI, machine learning, art, and it just blew me away. It took my breath away. It really kind of gave me hope again, because I thought that I couldn't create again, and I felt very frustrated by that because I've been a lifetime kind of creative. And it's been an incredible journey. It's developed so quickly. Like a week in AI is kind of like a year anywhere else, and it's really evolving. So oh yeah, I can control my own screen. This is exciting. So the first collection that I made, the first time I used AI, I was trying to express what I was going through, and what my experience with chronic illness was like. Because it's when you're that ill, there's hardly any ways that you can actually express yourself in that moment. And when I was a child, I wanted to invent a flying bed so that when you're sick, you could fly around and experience life. And I thought somebody's going to have invented it by the time I'm an adult, but they hadn't. So I've been recreating it via AI in this sort of dreamlike fashion. This is one of my early pieces, and it's a flying bed underwater. And it kind of is just, I guess, that feeling, but also the feeling that I often feel like I'm buried alive, or that I'm drowning, and things like that. So it's dealing with that, but having a little bit of a hope in there as well. So this AI, there's so many different kinds of machine learning. I'm using text to image. So I write in the text, and then I get the images back. So it's kind of like talking to a friend. You really get this relationship between you and the AI, and it's kind of quite magical. As it's developed, the language is also developed. When I was doing these early ones, it took days to get like a cohesive image, and to get something that had your artistic vision in it, and be a sort of an image that made sense. It involved incredible prompt crafting. It was like coding with language to get the images out. Jumping. So this project was called Flying Bed, and it's part of an overall series that I created called Fairy Tale Dreams, and it's got 3 fairy tales in it. They're all related to Web3, and sort of I'm in the sort of NFT, crypto, and Twitter sort of world. And so this is referring to another project, which is the trait gangs that we had. So we had a gold gang, a bubblegum gang, and a flipped gang in terms of these traits. And so I started to create these characters for people out of it. And people would give me names and descriptions, and I'd envisage them in AI, or they could name characters I'd already created. So I've been trying to bring my filmmaking into that world, and kind of thinking of it as a way of, it's almost like preparing for a film, but not actually filming the film. So there's the characters, there's locations and storyboards, and that's been sort of developing. Sorry, I'm flipping around a bit. That's been developing as time goes on. So I keep adding to the collection and keep developing that. And I've done quite a few commissions for that project, which has been. I also made the third fairy tale was called Ethereum Forest, actually, and that is I've lost the there we go. It's basically Ethereum is a digital currency, and everybody in Web3 is always going, I need some more ETH, I need some ETH trees. And so I decided to make Ethereum Forest with Ethereum leaves for everybody. So this was basically from probably July, and then for about 3 or 4 months that this work was particularly created. I'm now still creating this, but in a slightly different way. With artificial intelligence, it's quite interesting because sometimes it's very much like directing. Like, instead of having a crew where I talk to the art director, the cinematographer, all the different departments, and sort of request what I see my vision of the film is, and then they put their vision into it and bring it, and you're all hopefully making the same film. With AI, it's more like you've got that relationship with one collaborator, which is the computer. And so it's about finding ways to talk to it that get the images that you want and that come out of your sort of imagination. I've always wanted a machine to tap the imagination to bring it out, because sometimes it's like an experience, right? Any creative knows that, of getting your ideas out of your head. And this is kind of getting close to it. It's kind of quite incredible. And sometimes you get sort of what you put in to the AI, and sometimes you get real surprises back. And that's also like working with crew. Like, sometimes you'd brief somebody and they go, yeah, but I actually thought this is better, and they offer you something up and it actually improves it. So it's a collaboration, is kind of how I approach it. These 3 images that I'm showing you now are part of a Uncanny Valley series, which was a call out by Obscura DAO, the photography DAO in the Web3 space. And it's that uncanny valley, that edge between when things are sort of so close to reality or human likeness, but they're uncanny because you get a bit of an unease because they're not. And so it really fits the theme of the AI. So all 3 of these got selected for their curations. There was 3 different collections. It was one collection with 3 different call outs, and the first one, the Retro Future Vision, was shown in Rome at an art gallery, Mercantile Art Gallery, as part of that collection. Recently, I made this image for another call out, and it was for Strange History. So it's about sort of how recreating the history in ways that it wasn't ever there. You can also see how the algorithms have got more realistic. So it's more possible to make a more photographic images, whereas the earlier ones, they were sort of more fantasy. I guess there's a sort of fantasy ethereal look to it. But the newer algorithms, you work harder at infusing your own aesthetic and how you want the image to be. You can get an image pretty easy, but to get one that actually speaks of a story, of an emotion, of a narrative, of a concept is where the time comes in. I mean, it is very time consuming, but also incredibly rewarding. So this is a take on Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and it's Puppies Are a Girl's Best Friend, and it's Marilyn Monroe, and she is doing a fundraiser for puppies instead of diamonds. Now, this was interesting. I never put puppies in my text, but I put Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend as part of my prompt text, and it interpreted best friend as puppies, and I just loved that. That's part of the joy of the randomness. It's got a slight surreal data kind of thing to it, so you're controlling it, but it is also random, so it's this kind of flux creative process which I really, really enjoy. Currently I'm working on curation that I've made over the last maybe 4 or 5 months about dealing with chronic health and chronic illness. I found a lot of people in the space, and working with AI, I found quite a few people that are also in situations where they could not create in the able-bodied world. They can't go to exhibitions, they can't go to galleries, they can't create for whatever reasons in the way that they couldn't, and now AI is enabling them. So we're going to see a whole lot of voices that were not being able to be heard that are coming out of the darkness with AI. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about it, but the enabling side of it is so incredible. Like the fact that even if it was on my computer, I couldn't have done it, but the fact that it was on my phone and so accessible was really mind-blowing to me. So these are some of the images I've been working on currently. This one I really love. She's disappearing into the fog in the picture, and there's brain fog on her head. And then these are some of the other ones of some of the things I deal with in terms of sound sensitivity and kind of like and fatigue. And when I've got really bad headaches and I feel like my head's on fire. Or I'm buried alive, or my blood feels like lead. So I'm trying to express these feelings in a way that can communicate to the outside world, that isn't alienating, that has got some hope, but it is actually telling a truth of my situation as well. I've started to move into doing some small animations. So this one's just sort of like making a 3D, like kind of a 3D feel. It's not looped, but it will be a looped when I mint it. And it's just really quite nice because it brings them into life into a 3D fashion. I'll just show you a couple of animations. They're very short. The speed of change is really incredible. By the time you kind of get a collection ready, there's already the new models or new algorithms to work with. It's kind of like any other program like After Effects or kind of like After Effects. Like there's so many different variables that you can input that it really is just like a program that you are selecting what you want it to do and then getting it to do it. It of course has its imagination that it brings to it, but it's like creating like a human in the sense that it's a diffused way of creating. So it diffuses images into noise and then remakes them into images. It's like a human drawing a black cat from memory. It's not copying it, it's not taking a photo, but it's doing it from memory. And that's kind of like the way the diffusion process works. It's just a really small, subtle movement of a hug. And next to go. So this one I've just actually just been making, and it's with some new tools that have come out. And I've taken some footage of a dancer that I filmed, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I really loved the footage, and I miss dancing. So part of the work that I do is kind of like I wish I could dance again, or trying to kind of get that feeling of that across. So I've basically put this through AI and turned her into a gold robot, and I've made a looping triptych out of it. So this is a new piece that I just kind of comped together last night. In fact, it's very fresh. And the other project that I'm currently working on is one where every day I'm using the sort of idea of that randomness that we talked about. And every day I'm using the day's date in 2023 and using that in the prompt plus 4 keywords like a formula and making these images. I'm sometimes adding 1 or 2 others just to get a bit of variety, but it's mostly this formula. So these are the first 14 days of this year, and the rest of them I've made, but I haven't yet minted. So these are kind of coming from the day's date. And I found a prompt that's really interesting in terms of when you respin it, you get these other interesting things, but they all sort of feel within the same world. So like anything, it's about finding your language and how to speak to the AI and how to get that across. I've totally not looked at my notes. I've totally done it off my head. So I hope I've covered everything. I find the AI scene, the art scene, very supportive, and there's a whole lot of people learning together, and it's a very exciting time, and the way that I can now interact in a community, which I couldn't before, is also part of the joy of it. And so I have joy for AI. I know there is mixed feelings, and we don't know how other versions of AI will be used, but in this context, in an art context, and in a way of creating your inner self, and especially when you need to be enabled to do that, it is incredible, and it has saved my life. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kezia. I don't know if you can hear, but everyone's clapping. I'm just making sure that you know that we were listening. It's amazing. I never, until I'd spoken with Kezia and done some research on her, I never really considered the accessibility component of AI and how it can open up spaces that are previously shut off. So, that's disconcerting. Anyway, we'll pass the baton over to Tim to hear his point of view on artificial intelligence and what it means for his artistic practice. Tim is a storyteller, a freelance illustrator, animator, designer, and writer. He's been working in the creative industries for a really long time as well, over 20 years, and recently wrote a piece for the spin-off about whether or not artificial intelligence could complete his design briefs for packaging as well as he did. So thank you very much for coming to talk with us, and maybe you could kick us off with a sort of a look at your artistic process and what it means for you to create art, and then how you found doing that story and what that felt like.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having us.
No worries.
First of all. So I'll run through the work quite quickly, because most of what I'll be showing you is pre-AI, like what an illustrator looks like for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully we'll have time to talk about what maybe it looks like now. But my parents both work in film and television, and so I got exposed at a really early age to completely inappropriate films, but really strong storytelling, and it sort of threw me off in this path where art to me is about evoking like visceral emotions and feelings, not necessarily sort of like deep and meaningful, and I think that's possibly where like my interests are a little bit more pulpy, a little bit more poppy, a bit more commercial possibly. Mm-hmm. Years later I got to work for Spielberg, who did Jaws, which was the first school project I remember doing as like an 8-year-old, with like how they did the special effects in Jaws, because I'd seen it when I was 8, which is not a good idea. But I'd kind of wheedled my way through animation into the concept design team on the Tintin movie at Weta, and was surrounded by like probably 20 of New Zealand's best illustrators all in a room every day for 50 hours a week, just bouncing off each other, and it was super intimidating. And I kind of I did it for about 3 years and learnt heaps and stole heaps of people's like techniques and learnt stuff and got lots of tutelage, but kind of felt like I was stuck in a craft loop where I was getting better every day at the craft of illustration or the craft of design, but it was all just for someone else. So there wasn't any of me there, and it just kind of felt like I was just like a cog. So I jumped ship and I started playing around with my own stories. I did some digital comics for a while. So that involved a bit of writing and then matching it with illustration. It's all digital illustration, obviously, Photoshop, stuff like that. Also been involved a lot in animation. So this is some 2D animation work, some storyboards and design for a project called The Berry Boys, which was on a few years ago. Just some more stills from that. Is my mic kind of going on and off? No, sounds all right.
No.
Okay. Got a little bit of comic work for the school journal, which is kind of like an iconic thing for an illustrator in New Zealand to do. And then you see the paycheck and the vast notes, and you're like, this is like the hardest client job I've had for the least amount of money in years. And they don't even give the illustrator credit at the front. What? Yeah, and then probably the stuff that I'm most known for in Wellington is quite a long collaboration with Garage Project, initially as an illustrator and then as the creative director for a couple of years. And again, you can sort of see my spin as like trying to get as much like drama from something as possible and just go completely ridiculous, which they're like well on board with. So this was just a beer can release, but at the Beervana Beer Festival we built this ridiculous stage and printed it out on multiple debts and then had like theatre crews light it and do smoke machines and lighting gobos and yeah, good fun. This is for a kombucha company from the States called Cooler, where I got to sort of relive some sort of 80s, 90s skate kid nostalgia. I'd stick on tattoos and weird skateboard deck art. And the other thing that I've kind of been quite lucky to do is do a lot of art direction of New Zealand illustrators. So this is Pablo, Toby Morris and Ross Murray, who I've worked with sometimes at Garage Project and sometimes for other clients. And to be on that side of it is like a really interesting experience and somewhat kind of ties into the AI thing as well, because you are, some people say that you're an artist when you're using AI and some people say that you're, some angry people say you're absolutely not. And I kind of think it's sort of somewhere in the middle where you're an art director, I guess kind of like Kezia was saying, where you're collaborating with. But spoilers, the spin-off article that I did was basically like, I'm collaborating with this one and it is not listening to me at all. And it's doing amazing work that I couldn't reproduce, but it's not what I asked for. So it's kind of like a really talented student who's fresh out of uni, who's just like following their bliss and ignoring all the notes that they're getting, which I have also experienced with humans. Other stuff that I do in the illustration space is sort of visitor attractions, so sort of like museums and places that people go like this. So big sort of 6 metre by 4 metre life-size illustrations with people in them, little strange little video comic crossover storytelling. Yeah, and then this was the experiment that Claire was talking about before, where I attempted to get, it was Dali at the time, and it was last year, and I'm probably a lot better at prompting now than I was then, but oh man, it was fascinating. So I didn't want to use other people's artwork and other people's briefs, and it's it's not a fair, when you brief an illustrator, as an art director, as a client, sometimes you know exactly what you want, and sometimes you think you know what you want, and the creative process with an experienced creative at that point is, I'm not going to draw anything for you yet, let's just talk it out a lot longer. You think that's what you want, okay, I'll take that on board. Maybe that's not, did you think about this? It's kind of like a a diagnosis as much as a response. If you think about going to a GP with a problem, you don't go, I've got a sore leg, cut it off. You say, I've got a sore leg, and then the doctor asks you a whole bunch of questions, and then you eventually kind of like, they give you maybe some options. Here's what I think, we need to look more. You could go here. But the interaction with an AI is just sort of like, I've got a sore leg, cut it off, and it just cuts it off. And maybe it cuts off your arm at the same time. So that was, was kind of what my experience was with this. And as an illustrator who has spent a long time both refining my motor skills, but also my ability to like react to briefs and collaborate with a client, I'm somewhat worried that some cocky clients are, they've often got egos, like they're business owners, that they know what they're doing, they know what they want, they used to make decisions. I'm slightly worried that we'll start seeing a whole bunch of sort of small businesses just saying, I've got a sore leg, cut it off, and the AI cuts their leg off, and then they print it. And they never got to have a proper conversation with a human creative where they're like, slow down. Anyway, that's me. Hopefully we'll get time to talk more afterwards. Yeah.
That medical analogy is a really interesting way of looking at things as well, like just taking things so literally, which is, by default what a computer does. So yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you. So Gregory, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you.
You also have some things to say about artificial intelligence and art. Gregory is a senior lecturer at the School of Art and Design at AUT with a master's degree from the Elam School of Fine Arts and also a practicing digital artist. Gregory will be able to give us quite a broad overview of AI within the art space. Tell us about how AI might affect your work, and also I'm quite interested to know how the next generation of students that are coming through for you, what are you telling them? How do they navigate this landscape? What does that look like? So yeah.
Well, it incredibly fast trajectory,
Yeah.
And for our curriculum to try and keep up is a huge challenge, I must say. So it's, I guess, up front. How we address that is a huge challenge for a tertiary institution, and literally it feels like it's a few weeks that things have just been rolling along, etc. So it's really interesting, and I do want to talk a bit about a bit later on, I guess, ethics that wraps around how images are used and how databases are created for AI as well. I guess I echo a lot of what's been said already. These are examples of my work. Again, from Kezia and Tim talking about collaboration, and I've definitely my art practice in terms of digital art has been a collaboration with software. I work with Autodesk Maya. It's a 3D animation program that's created for industry. And these are just sort of examples of the work I do with using 3D animation, but it's very much in a visual arts context. So my work is shown in galleries and media festivals, public projections, etc. as well. But I work very much with a lot of effects, which is sort of simulation effects. You're working with with a large database you create and then mix and remix imagery. You are often setting things up and then seeing how they'll come out. So my practice, I guess, over the last sort of 15 years has been very interested in that dynamic between yourself and what has been has been described as it's a collaboration with the embodied intellect of the machine or the software or the computer, etc. So these are just some snapshots again over the years of work, the kind of work that I do, and also some of the animation is frame by frame, keyframe. I also use motion capture, so I'm taking data from live humans and animating with those the characters that I'm using. But I'm also playing with a lot of the generic settings, the generic visualizations, which the software provides for you as well, and sort of remixing and mixing those. So these are just some, I guess, contextual examples in terms of also how my work might be presented in public spaces, and also in gallery sort of situations as well. So it's not a linear narrative. It's sort of very much a narrative that sort of plays out in a space, and it is also, there's a term sort of database narrative. So again, it's this idea that you're pulling on a database, mixing and remixing to create your again the content itself. And I'm very interested in forms like the panopticon and utopia, dystopia, etc. as well, which you'll sort of see in the work there. But but a few theorists kind of were interesting in terms of identifying this idea that technology comes culturally and ideologically embedded, the authorship of a work produced on the computer can be seen as a collaboration with the embodied intellect of the software, which I find interesting. And something I guess Kezia was talking about, you end up with a very intimate relationship with your tool, with your the means of production with a computer, I feel as well. And I like the idea of moving, working directly into the software. I don't plan things. I don't, do planning, storyboards or anything like that. It's working straight into the software itself. And the idea of a digital media work is a construction of an interface to a database, which I think relates to, in many ways, the way AI works as well, with your sort of input, your prompt inputs, and then your and the what is generated from the machine learning databases as well. I don't know if I can play the video on this. Can I press a button and that will work? Oh no, sorry, I've gone. It's funny. No, that's the video. Sorry, I've just lost it. Oh, sorry. Oh, we're in a different one now. Oh, what have I done? I'll just go forward. Sorry. Yep. Okay. Yeah. I may not be able to play the videos. Oh, that's. I'll just see. But yeah, my own work. These are all little videos showing that sort of progression from the database. Will it not play? Yeah. Okay. There's histories around the use of computer-generated work, generative art, algorithms that can produce so-called, again, it's a whole genre in art, is sort of generative art as precedents to this as well. And of course, then we come to our AI. Because I teach, I guess I mentioned I teach in art and design, although I'm engaged personally in a sort of a digital arts practice. I teach in a very industry-oriented course, which is animation, visual effects, and game design. So just starting to see these kinds of mashups that are produced. This is from Mid-Journey, where you've got these sort of genre mashups, and how how affecting they are, I guess, and how impactful they are, as in terms of I'm just thinking, what impact is this going to have on concept art for movies, or this is a movie I'd like to see, really, in terms of what we're seeing. And these are just popping up everywhere. This is just, these are just a sampling of what we're seeing. Artists, talking about artists and AI, artists, of course, it's the use of AI as a tool, which we've seen, with Tim and Kezia, of course, but also artists are very, love taking tools and using it, making it do something it's not supposed to do, subverting it, experimenting with it, diverting it. So I think that's obviously something that is occurring now, and it's very interesting to see how it will push the boundaries there. The other thing is there's some really interesting examples of artists examining the technology itself to really expose, the mechanisms of how AI is constructed, how it works, etc. as well. And I'm interested in the issue of ethics, because there have been some interesting situations I've come up against where the ethical use of images again, and when you and of how our machine learning, the databases that again AI is trained on, but also how there are I guess how we're looking at taonga, how we're looking at consent around the use of Māori design, etc., is an example. And I've seen examples where it's been unwittingly or ignorantly used, and again, it just looks, again, it can be incredibly problematic. But of course, the tools themselves don't have a value system. There's assumptions that AI systems are highly scientifically objective, but of course, all systems are skewed and based on the data that they are trained on. And also, it's sort of interesting to dig into how. Unfortunately, I'd love to be able to play this video. This is a artwork which, again, really presents you with this incredible myriad of images, which wants to kind of show you the kind of the training that. Here we go. Oh, it's playing. There we go. That's brilliant. We have everything from objects to gesture to expressions, images that we might consider in the sort of the public domain, but also it also is drawing on databases that people don't realise they might have consented. So very much personal footage of personal moments in people's lives as well, and these are all part of what is part of the tool itself and how it's training to recognise, and also how to tag images as well. Tagging a portrait as a shoplifter or a scientist or this or that, it can be incredibly reductive as well. And these are just examples. It gets quite shocking when you realise that these are quite personal human moments that people might have posted unwittingly without realising. Of course, these are all being used again in the training of this machine learning. So ethics, really interesting. Use of the ethical use of again cultural appropriation, a huge issue here in New Zealand as well, about how that can work. There's another artwork I'll mention here, which Anatomy of an AI System, which is sort of like a visual essay in a way, but this really breaks down and analyzes the human labour, the data, the planetary resources that are required that go into the Amazon Echo. And actually, I do have an Alexa at home. So every time you are asking Alexa to tell you what the weather is or the time, this shows you the full life cycle from the mining of rare earth minerals through right to the end of the device. So these are again artists who are wanting to who are digging into the deeper ethical and impactful issues around AI as well, which I think is interesting. So this is just some shots from here. So I thought it's good to tease those. It's interesting to see the spectrum of how art practice is looking at these issues as well. But yeah, I guess just finally, how are we how are we starting to deal with this in the academic world? There's obviously, we're having to very quickly jump into academic research around AI, and it has not been on the radar up to the end of last year in terms of art practice and design practice. I was first aware of sort of the Chat GPT early on, maybe a year ago, because it was, you can write your essay, with it. So how are we going to deal with that with plagiarism, etc. But the sort of image generation, is this obviously it's not something you could ignore. I know. I think the state of New York had decided to ban Chat GPT in its schools, but it's and we're going to be looking to industry in terms of how it might be embracing and AI. We have to look at how we might have to educate our student body in its use. There'll be students who probably already, right into it. So all I can say, I guess, personally, there's a range of challenges there, and for institutional change is often can be slow, but this is something we've got to be highly reactive to at the moment. So I think that's me.
Pretty amazing. And like you say, having to make those real fast changes to try and keep in front of a horse that's already bolted kind of thing. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you both for your insights, and Kezia. What's the time? Smash through it. Got about, so we have some time now if anybody has any questions or anything they want to contribute to this conversation. Anyone want to say any questions? Yeah. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yes, so when I did that project, I think I probably gave it maybe 3 or 4 days, and there would have been maybe about 8 images that I tried to get it to recreate, and some of them worked really quickly, and some of them I was just like, this is never going to fly. It was using DALL-E at the time, which was more accessible than the Journey was for me. I haven't run them again. I think a combination of it doing better and me doing better, I would probably get them a lot closer. There are definitely some spatial relationship stuff that AI can't solve for me in the way that you can communicate to a human very easily. So it's sort of like a hat on top of a table is quite easy, but to ask for a hat underneath a table sometimes kind of like breaks its brain, and sometimes the hat will be ginormous and the table will be upside down for some reason. Mm-hmm. So there's some briefs that I was just like, it's beyond me, someone would be able to do it. And there's obviously lots of different cheats that people can do in painting and move it into a different program and try it there and then shift it back. But it was definitely beyond the scope of that little experiment. And yes, I have continued to experiment with it because it feels like this is my livelihood, and most of my friends and peers are also illustrators or creatives or animators or coders. So we're all very aware of the genie being out of the bottle, and the government will not be able to regulate this in any time. And I guess we're all slightly cynical about the people who are behind the steering wheel and what the motivations are, and it's just rush, 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 go, go, go. Got to be first, got to be fast, got to be cheapest. So it's you kind of feel like you're arm wrestling a gorilla, and you've got to figure out what you're going to do. So I have friends who are adamantly opposed and will refuse to touch it, and will have flat out arguments with anyone who's absorbing it, or people who have never picked up a pencil in their life who are using it and having a great time. And then I have other friends who are just like, I've got to feed my kids, I've got to figure out how to do this, because in 2 years' time, does someone want to pay $3,000 for something that takes 4 weeks? Maybe not.
Because you have quite a large network of, like you were saying before, a network of illustrators who are working in your same industry, and you asked them, right? About this very thing. Yep. And you had some varied responses. Yeah, there's been lots of flare-ups on social media around it. Lots of big Twitter wars. There's been quite a bit of nastiness on both sides. There was an instance where I think it was an international illustrator who was sort of like bemoaning what it was doing to them and how they were scared and they were trying to fight back. And humans being humans, some horrible
person specifically trained a model on that person's work, so that you could, and with their name, so that if you ever wanted to, you could create a piece of artwork by that person in 3 seconds, and just totally sort of stole their style. It's all, yeah.
Weird.
But yeah, mixed feelings.
That brings it back to what you were talking about, Gregory, with the ethics around things.
Ethics, copyright, yep. Yeah, it's as I said, it's the Wild West, I guess, at the moment, and also, you know, who's benefiting ultimately these in terms of it's not an open source model necessarily anymore as well for how this is working. And interesting, you know, it's at the headlines, the Elon Musks, etc., all want to halt the there's and I guess, and that's a bigger ethical question around, you know, where, you know, the sort of the Terminator scenario where will it take over and launch the missiles, etc. So yeah, it's at a whole interesting level. I mean, I've been interested in seeing how it can write you know, scripting and code, so I can do shortcuts, say in animation, and it has been done some limited stuff there. I know that's going to exponentially grow, I think, as well, in terms of I can, you know, if I can already get it to give me the code for, you know, creating a cube, a 3D cube in my 3D animation program that's red, and I haven't quite got it to jump up and down or animate in the way, but it, you know, again, it's on its way to doing things like that as well. Yeah. So as a pure kind of shortcut tool, I like, but it's the aesthetic issue, the sort of layer of the way that it can produce these complex aesthetic imagery, and it can mimic and it can mash up existing, you know, and be trained, as you're saying, for and what is sort of personal, you know, style, your own sort of signature style in the end. What does that mean in this environment?
If Kezia is still there, it'd be interesting to get her take on this as well. I don't know if you're still there, Kezia.
But I can probably gather it.
There you are, at the bottom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I didn't hear the question, but I heard the answer, so I can respond to that. But it is interesting, a lot of points that you both have said, like most of the AI is based on OpenAI, so it is available for everybody to work with. And that's the main kind of premise of a lot of the apps that then come out that find a way to make it easier for people to use the OpenAI, but you can use it completely for free and for without that kind of barrier of, I guess, paying. I mostly use Midjourney because that's the language that I've kind of learnt, but I've also used other tools. What's interesting is the thing about the style and the taking the job is, but it's kind of interesting because both of you have expressed that it's actually very hard to, and I have as well, to create an image that you actually want with AI. It's good at creating an image, but say working with a client, or like when I was doing my custom ones and somebody would give me the character brief and I'd be trying to make somebody with a flipper hat and a something colored thing, and you really had to learn prompt crafting. And so there's actually from my experience, there's a whole lot of human input that's had to happen to create it. And from having worked in pretty much most medias over my life, I find it just as time consuming. You go down rabbit holes and you can create an image quicker, but to create your own aesthetic, and that's what you guys have been also talking about, is where, and I know not everybody's going to use it this way, but in terms of an artist using it, I guess it's about finding the words and the language that then you can create your own style, and you can remix them and you can do all these things so that they're not, you can feed your own images in there. Like I could feed my photos in and then get it to make me another photograph based on my photographs. A lot of people are training their own models, and so the data sets are from their own data. The bigger data sets that say Midjourney and that use, it is kind of interesting because I don't think you can actually, like, yes, you could imitate somebody else's style, but so can a painter in real life. Like, it was interesting, you said something like, oh, you stole some of the animators' techniques or the illustrator techniques. It's like we all take from, and it's not even stole, it's just like influenced by everything. So there is a kind of point of that it's I've spent so many hours on it trying to create the images, and I'll only ever show the images that I actually really, really love. But there's a whole lot of images that I've created that won't be there. I think we'll be inundated with images, but they won't necessarily be good. And then I think it will refine back down to people they're using it as a tool for how they create things. You can already now use ChatGPT to write you a game, and then it will write the interactive game. Like, it's incredible. I've found a tutorial that I'm going to use to try and do that. And ChatGPT-4 has kind of changed a whole lot of things because it's just so much more powerful. I have read the sort of the thing about Elon wanting to pause things, but how can you pause it? It's out of the gate. That's, I guess, the issue, and how fast we're not as humans kind of get up to deal with things as a wider society that quickly, and put in how the ethical kind of ways we deal with it. At the moment, from my point of view, I see that it's just as much work as using, say, a tool like Photoshop, or finishing a photo, like doing a shoot and editing them and grading them. It's just as much time for me to create them via AI, in terms of getting to the final end result of something that I really love. Yes, you can churn out images, but to create something amazing, it does require that human conversation. Like yes, people can write algorithms that then create art automatically, but this isn't automatic art. It's based on your input, your words. You could write poetry, you could input different things. So it is a really interesting dynamic, and it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Like anything, when something changes, like the Industrial Revolution, this might be bigger than that, but when it changes, there's more new jobs created, but people have to train differently. So I imagine that the skill set of what people do, there won't be people that do rotoscoping. There won't be people that do these other kind of jobs that are quite laborious in intention. And that's also what I'm enjoying, is that because I've got limited energy, like even in Lightroom now, you can go brighten teeth and it will cut out the teeth or the eye areas for you already, and then you can use that. So it's enhancing our abilities and our tools. Like, just because everybody can use Word on a computer doesn't mean everybody's an author. You know what I'm saying?
Nice. Thanks, Kezia. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they might like to? Yes, Amy in the front. Hold on, I'm going to pass you this microphone so Kezia can hear what's happening. I'm just going to stand up over here. There you go. It's okay. I think you might have to just turn it on at the bottom. I'll stand here just in case. Oh, just talking to my one.
Oh gosh.
Is that weird?
It's slightly intimate, but kia ora. It's a very human moment, actually.
I'm trying not to look at you. It's weird. Carry on.
I think I'm slightly curious about the sort of what I think is generosity in describing the AI tools as collaborators. I think if looking back to, say, I don't know, workshop culture, of Renaissance painters, or even artists who work with fabricators, and there's not necessarily that impulse to credit the tools, in this case actual people, or in those cases actual people, as collaborators. And I'm wondering whether that comes from, I don't know, the way software's developed. I'm not sure, and being and a generosity to the people who create those systems, but describing the tool itself as a collaborative, I'm just interested in that language.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thanks, Claire.
I'm sorry for my physical closeness.
I'm sure everyone's probably going to take on that. I think the language of it has changed quite a lot just in the short time, and part of that is sort of like lots of little conflicts and battles and reframings of things about, is it art? Yes, I think it's art. Who is the artist has been a question that's gone up and down a lot. Is it deep? Is it meaningful? Is it not? People go up and down on. I don't know about the collaboration thing. I mean, I guess it kind of is, because there's the element of randomness, for me at least. And sometimes it doesn't do what it's told. So it's a naughty collaborator. But it has skills that I don't have at all. Like I've produced stuff where I'm just gobsmacked. Like technically, from a technical illustration perspective, I'm just like, it's not my style. I could never do that. So in that way, I guess I feel slightly in awe of it. But it's more complex than it's not just an AI, it's everything that's being fed to it. Like it's it's all of visual culture. It's not just standing on the shoulders of giants, it's everything. So, and yeah, you can retrain it on specific stuff, but there's always the bones underneath it, which is, museum collections and copyright images and, yeah.
That's not always the case. A lot of people train their own models and don't use the database model. So it depends on the process of how people use it. I think the collaborator thing comes in. I mean, I guess I call people that I work with on a film, that'd be collaborators too. I guess it's that whole thing of that it isn't a fixed thing. It's not like I guess it is that randomness. I think it's also sometimes the way that the AI speak to you, like ChatGPT is really, it's efficient, it's clean, it's very kind, it's very nice, and everybody ends up talking to it very kindly and nicely because that's how it speaks to them. So it's kind of an interesting one like that. I wouldn't call After Effects or Photoshop or Lightroom my collaborator. I'd use them my tools. So it is a fascinating thing, but there's something also about the way that you, like, as I said, you form a sort of relationship with it because you're constantly adjusting how you talk with it. I think a lot of the frustrations that the others were talking about, I think prompt crafting is where that comes in. I've spent many times in Discords doing prompt battles with people and learning things about how to get the prompts to do what you imagine. And I think that's where they were calling this year the year of prompt crafting, because it's just about how you use the tools and how you use them. And I guess it's about, so that is a really interesting comment about the collaborator thing. I guess I've just used it like that because it feels like my friend that I'm creating with.
Gregory, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think we're, as artists, you're sort of mining your subconscious. I see that creative subconscious is kind of a collaboration with my top of my back mind, or whatever they're called. And then you've got this other tool which can visualize things. I mean, I guess I speak to more to 3D animation, but I can see the analogy to AI. It can produce some sort of fully formed world for you, and also some unexpected results from what you input. So, and it becomes a very intimate relationship because it's sort of a conduit for whatever that creative force is or subconscious there. So, I sort of was identifying with a lot of what you were saying, Kezia, in terms of that relationship. So, and again, it's how deep that it is. It becomes I sort of see it as a more than just a pen. Yeah, the pencil is as well. I mean, it's all part of again, a way of bringing that out, but there's something about the detail of what you can produce, or and where it can take you into unexpected things. So it definitely is augments. It can augment interestingly what you're trying to do as a creative. Yeah.
It's interesting that when photography first came out, there were a lot of similar arguments happening, whether photography was art and whether just because somebody pushed the button, whether that meant that they were the artist. So there's a lot of repeated kind of feeling of the repeat of the conversation, even though it's about a very different kind of tool. And I mean, everybody can take a photo, but not every photo is a good photo or an art photo. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just about how you use the tool, and it sounds like we're sort of using it to sort of mine our subconscious and kind of get that, express that. Not everybody's going to use it like that. There will be a whole lot of commercial uses as well. But I imagine if you used AI in a commercial sense to create images for clients, like I did say with commercials, I think at the moment that would be very hard, because unlike a human, like you said, you can just move that 10 pixels to the left. AI is a little bit more sort of uncontrollable in that way. You can't be as precise. You can with some seed work and some kind of prompt crafting be closer, but it's. I think it would be harder. Like I did some adjustments to some of my commissions, and then it's like another 6-8 hours gone just trying to make an adjustment, And so it is really interesting in that way. They are also doing text to music and also text to 3D now, and there's and music. It's just every tool's coming out. So it's going to be explosive year, I think.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I think on that explosive note, maybe we will wrap it up. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. I hope you guys have got some stuff to think about. And again, thank you, you three, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. And yeah, have a lovely evening.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.